Now, before we get into today's video, I want to start off by thanking you guys. Ndicela nje ukuthi enkosini kakhulu. Thank you truly to everyone who has subscribed, supported, and shown up here. Yeni nani, I see you and I appreciate you more than you know. But also, I don't want this to just be a subscription-based relationship. I'd like for this to be a space where we get to engage, challenge one another respectfully, and grow through conversation. So please do share your thoughts in the comments, engage with one another and me. And if this message resonates, share it so that it can reach even more people. Nkosini for being here. Molini, and welcome to yet another episode of Conversations with Nkosi. Now, this is the news commentary section where we will be offering insightful commentary and exploring various perspectives on the stories that shape our world. Before we unpack today's discussion, it's important for me to, just acknowledge the moments that we're currently witnessing, or this phase that we're currently in as a country. I would also just like to, recognize Mam Jacinta Ngobese Zuma, or Sisandile, and everyone else, the collaborators who have shown up and decided to stand firm and amplify their voices. Now, whether we agree with every aspect of this phase that we're currently in, or this wave that we are witnessing, what matters now is the fact that this reflects something that is deeper, stirring within society. And also, before we go any further, it's also important to properly contextualize one of the key figures, at the center of today's conversation, being Jacinta Ngobese Zuma. Now, for those of you eningamati, who is Jacinta Ngobese Zuma? Now, Jacinta is a South African media personality, broadcaster and activist from KwaZulu-Natal, who was born on the 6th of July. And she was raised primarily by her grandparents after her parents separated before her birth, which, is a background that many believe shaped both her resilience and her strong sense of community responsibility. Jacinta initially studied supply chain management at the University of KZN, but her path soon led her into the field or world of media. Over more than a decade, she built a solid career in radio, starting in campus radio, and then she moved through platforms such as Vibe FM, Inanda FM, Kakasi FM, and later Vuma FM. Many people came to know her as the voice behind the cruise with Jacinta Ngobese. Her work earned her industry recognition, including the MTN Radio Award for Best Content Producer back in 2014 and Best Female Radio Presenter at the KZN Entertainment Awards in 2020. Over time, however, her public role expanded beyond broadcasting. Jacinta transitioned into civic activism, and then she became the founder of the March and March movement, a pressure group focused on immigration concerns, service delivery, and what they describe as restoring accountability within South African communities. Now, this shift alone has placed her at the center of national attention and controversy. To supporters, she is seen as a fearless voice willing to raise conversations others avoid. To critics, her rhetoric and tactics are seen as being divisive and inflammatory. We've even witnessed people calling her xenophobia, and her activism has led to legal challenges, intense public scrutiny, and renewed debate, especially following the resurfacing of historic social media posts for which she, publicly apologized alongside allegations linked to protest-related incitement. And that is precisely why understanding who she is matters. Now, guys, regardless of where she stands, Jacinta Ngobese Zuma has become an undeniable force in, the national conversation that many South Africans feel they have been locked out for far too long. This is something that we cannot hide. With that context in mind, we need to ask a deeper question. Why are so many people rallying behind this broader movement? Much of the media narrative insists, on framing this as South Africans refusing to coexist with fellow Africans, reducing the conversation to hostility toward foreign nationals. But I believe that framing alone is incomplete and deeply misleading. I say this as someone with personal ties beyond South Africa myself. Now, guys, this tension was recently echoed by DJ and producer Oscar Mbo, who spoke openly about his own experiences navigating strict, immigration systems in countries like Nigeria. He highlighted how lengthy visa processes and rigid documentation requirements are enforced without hesitation, and how failure to comply often means, immediate denial of entry. His broader question struck a nerve. If other countries are allowed to enforce strict immigration systems in protection of their national interests, why is South Africa automatically labeled hostile for raising similar concerns? For many South Africans, this inconsistency, feels intentional. Now, let's also just get into what, the anger is really about. This conversation is not simply about, hatred or discrimination, despite how quickly that conclusion is often drawn. For many South Africans, the concern runs deeper. Undocumented immigration, pressure on already strained public resources, drug-related crimes, human trafficking, sex trafficking, and, growing instability within communities. It's not a secret. Our youth is struggling. We have the substance abuse, which is now a widespread problem, where we have many young people, that are also just vulnerable to being exploited. We have communities that feel abandoned, and they only, are being noticed once, that frustration on its own that they all experience collectively spills into a form of protest. Now, these realities cannot be dismissed or explained away. At the same time, and this is also important, it would be irresponsible, to speak in absolutes. Painting all, foreign nationals with one brush is wrong. Equally, dismissing the lived concerns of South Africans as mere intolerance is also just as dangerous, Bandase. This is where nuance becomes essential. We can actually hold two truths at once: the need to protect human dignity and the need to confront failures within governance, border management, service delivery, and law enforcement. Many citizens feel unheard, unprotected, and ignored. And they are marching because they want action. They are marching because they want accountability. They are marching because leadership has felt absent, while communities carry the weight. And guys, even political, leadership has begun to publicly acknowledge these pressures. Whether people are being genuine or not is a different topic for another day, and it is a relevant question because, again, we cannot shy away from the fact that it is election season, and the elections are said to take place this year on the 4th of November, if I'm not mistaken. So, one must also just look at that support and where it's coming from, and low-key question its authenticity. But I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but I'm just saying let us just also keep that in mind. Now we have the Gauteng Premier, Utatu Panyaza Lesofi, who has spoken about the serious strain faced by townships, particularly around service delivery and development. He spoke about access to housing, water, electricity, refuse removal, and formal ownership processes such as, the acquiring of title deeds and an end. How all of these systems are deeply tied to legal documentation and state capacity. So he, also just said that when these systems buckle, tensions rise, and that is why this issue cannot be reduced to mere emotional reactions, slogans, or media sound bites. This demands thoughtful engagement, policy-driven solutions, and most importantly, honest leadership, in his own words. But guys, South Africans are not rising for the sake of resistance. Many are rising because they want to be heard. And I think we've reached a point where we're also just tired of, senior leaders coming out and saying they stand with us and they understand what we're saying. I think we've reached a point where it's enough with, these speeches and responses, that are meant to ignite this common understanding between us two. And we just want solutions to the problems. We want our voices to be heard. We want action, to take place, not inaction. South Africans are demanding solutions. They're demanding accountability. They are demanding a future that does not ignore the realities faced by South Africans on a daily basis. Now, whether one agrees with every method or every message, the underlying cry is impossible to ignore. This conversation is bigger than just the headlines. It's bigger than, political positioning. It's also bigger than public figures. It is about a nation that is wrestling with questions of identity, belonging, governance, and responsibility. And perhaps the most important thing we can do in this moment is listen carefully, critically, and honestly. That marks the end of today's video. Thank you so much for lending your eyes and ears. I hope that you found today's video informative. Please do not forget to click on that subscription button or light the notification bell so that you do not miss out on any new uploads. Nkosi.